Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first live FSOMA news update. I am super excited to be able to bring this out to our community here. And tonight we have Ellen Teeter, the Executive Director of FSOMA, and David Biddy, the Vice President of FSOMA. And the main reason why we wanted to be able to start bringing these news updates out to our community is to make sure that we all have the most accurate, most up-to-date information on trends and topics and news that impact and influence us in our profession and our everyday practice. So I know some of you are active on social media, some of you are more active in our newsletter. And there has been conversation going around the last couple of weeks on CBD licensure for us acupuncturists. And there's a lot of other topics that we wanted to be able to discuss, like proper medical record keeping, which came up during the most recent Board of Acupuncture meeting, as well as biohazard requirements. So before I go ahead and give the floor to Ellen and David, I wanted to let you guys know that I'm going to be monitoring our chat box. So, this is really important for us, for FSOMA. We want you to know that we are here for you, for our community, to be a support and a resource for all of us. But we also need your help and your input. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns that come up during tonight's video, please make sure you write them in our chat box. I'll be monitoring throughout the next hour, and I'll make sure to bring them up as frequently as I can so that your comments and questions are addressed. So for those of you that are new with Zoom, if you go towards the bottom, there's a little bubble with 3 little dots. It says chat, just hit on that and just type in your questions. So now I will leave it up to David and Ellen to inform you guys of the most current FSOMA news.
Okay. Well, I thought I would let David talk first. He's been doing a lot of research on the CBD. I had seen it and posted some information, but we've gotten some more updates now on that. There's also been a number of, with the Board of Acupuncture, some discipline cases about medical record keeping. I've had phone calls from people who are being told by their insurance company they're not keeping adequate records and making them resubmit notes and telling them they need a class. I also have been dealing with some people who didn't know they needed biohazard to be registered as a biohazard waste generator with the county they're in. We can, after a year, get exempted from that, but you have to kind of show that you're a low waste generator, but that is a requirement. So I wanted to talk about that if we have time, but I'm going to let David lead off with the CBD because that's a new law that came into effect on January 1st. So David, take it away.
Thank you, Ellen. Good evening, Good evening, everybody. Had a chance over the last couple of days to respond to some questions regarding regulation for CBD oil or hemp extract product sales here in Florida. And the governor last summer signed new legislation that changed the classification of cannabis food products and in such a way that they are now regulated in the state. But with those, the regulations are fairly specific, and they're more or less from a law enforcement standpoint, they're relaxing the standards on one hand, and yet developing regulations so that everybody understands, what their role and responsibility is when it comes to handling hemp extract products, whether it's in a medical marijuana level or if it's in a food grade level, the way our license allows us to recommend and sell those products. So there's two components to the new legislation. One is specific to food permits or they call it hemp food establishment permits. And the other component for the legislation has to do with labeling requirements for any ingestible food based hemp extract products in Florida. So let me take the permitting part of it first. I have to really extend my gratitude to Mackenzie Lee Muir, who was able to provide me with an excellent contact at the Department of Agriculture, because I had spoken to two different representatives at the Agency for Consumer Services, and they had both provided me with inaccurate information that without more verification, unfortunately, we were ready to act on. So I'm really grateful for her input and providing me with an excellent contact. So the person Mackenzie suggested I speak to was Holly Bell, and she is the director of cannabis, the cannabis czar, if you would, under the Florida Department of Agriculture, and spoke with her directly today for about 15 minutes, and then we exchanged a few emails later in the day. So I don't know that there is a better source for this information in the state. Certainly, it's always subject to interpretation on the law. She's providing me her best interpretation, and that's what I'm going to share with you. The food permitting component of the new legislation that's effective January 1st, 2020, applies for retailers and food establishments. Unfortunately, they don't list every single type of situation and scenario under which a sales transaction can take place. So even though it may not appear like we're running food businesses, if you're selling food or dietary supplements in your office, it qualifies in some way as a food establishment. So the exemptions that apply for providers or for entities, establishments, businesses that are selling these products, they fall into two categories. They're either a minor food outlet or you're a food outlet. And the distinction there is based on how much linear square feet of product is available in your office. And the magic number is 12 linear feet. So if you imagine that you have dietary supplements, herbal formulas, anything that's otherwise available in the common area of your office that takes up less than 12 square feet, then you qualify as a minor food outlet and you are exempt from food permitting requirements. If you have more than 12 linear feet of display space in the common area of your office for things like I said, food items, dietary supplements, herbal formulas, ingestibles, these are things that need to be ingested, more than 12 linear feet, then you are going to have to contact the Department of Agriculture and apply for a permit as some type of food establishment. And whether you choose to sell CBD or hemp oil-based products will distinguish the type of permit that's required. But that is the big factor in deciding whether or not somebody qualifies as exempt or is not exempt and subject to permitting, is this 12 linear feet. So whether that's 6 2-foot shelves or 3 4-foot shelves or 1 long shelf, get out your tape measure and just determine how much display space in your office is dedicated to the resale of food products, dietary supplements, or hemp oil CBD products. If it's less than 12 feet, you're exempt from permitting, and no other aspect of that law is going to apply to you or your office, except for the second half of the law, and the statute speaks to labeling requirements for manufacturers who manufacture products that are then sold in Florida. So it becomes the responsibility of whoever the seller is, whether you're a provider or a retailer or an online fulfiller, whatever the case might be, is that you need to be familiar with what those labeling requirements are for any hemp oil extract or CBD oil product that's ingestible. This applies to things that we swallow and meant for internal use. So the indication of use, the recommended method for using the product is what's important here. If it's intended for internal use, then these requirements apply. So we're going to make them available in a written document for you online. Either Natalia or Ellen will have that sent out. But I'll go ahead and just read what those 6 items are now. And the first is, this applies to labeling requirements on the packaging of the product. And there's 6 things. One is, it needs to have a scannable barcode or a QR code linked to the certificate of analysis for the hemp extract by an independent testing laboratory. Now, this isn't something that you have to do. This is the manufacturer's responsibility, whoever makes that product. Your responsibility is to make sure that there is, when you open your box and you take out the product, that there's a QR code on it or some sort of scannable code that is linked to a certificate of analysis. And the certificate analysis is going to basically measure for contaminants and pesticides that are in the product. And there are certain limits on what the acceptable amount or presence of those chemicals and compounds are. But obviously, there's a separate resource where you can take a look at a long list of what those requirements are. But basically, the assay of the hemp oil extract should, if it's going into a product that's being sold to the public, it has to be under the thresholds required by the federal government, or there's separate instructions for manufacturers to destroy those products. So they shouldn't be in your office. But as long as you are familiar what those standards are, or you have a resource in your office so that you can find that, when you look at the labeling, it has either a barcode or a QR code that will take a consumer to a location, a digital location somewhere where they can look at that analysis. The second item that needs to be on the packaging for the hemp oil CBD product is a batch number. So when they manufacture these products, they manufacture them in lot numbers or batch numbers, and that needs to be printed on the labeling as well. They also want you to have an internet address or website where the batch information may be obtained. So there's going to be a lot of information on these little bottles, but there's labeling strategies and whatnot to allow them to do that. But you need to see each of the things that I've just described. The first being a QR code that brings them to the assay and the evaluation of it, a batch number, and then an internet address or website where they can identify the batch information, where that can be obtained. The fourth thing is an expiration date on the product. The fifth is the number of milligrams of hemp extract in that product has to be identified on the packaging. And the last thing is a statement that the product contains the total content of THC, and they spell it out as delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol concentration that does not exceed 0.3% on a dry weight basis. So this is going to be a standard disclosure that's on packaging for every single product that's sold legally in Florida after the first of the year. So those 6 things have to be on the packaging materials or on the bottle for any product that you hopefully recommend and sell that's associated with your business. I'd recommend take a look at any inventory that you have on hand now, and make sure that all 6 of those requirements are on the packaging for anything that you have presently in your office. If it's not, maybe you want to talk to the manufacturer about whether or not they've met that new requirement for Florida, and if so, maybe they'll swap out your inventory so that you're able to recover the value of those products. But either way, you don't want them going over the counter into a patient's hand if they don't meet the Florida standard effective January 1. Okay, that's really all I have to say on the CBD law as it applies to us. I hope the chat box is open if there's any questions for, that you have that you need me to clarify something. We'll see if we have time to do that.
Yeah, David, there's one that I think you could address is, does this new law include Huomarin, which I don't think it would apply. That's a dry Chinese herb, not a extract. But just wanted to, that's a question in the chat box.
I'm sorry, and when you say does it apply,
they're asking if this law about labeling and the linear feet and the contents apply to a raw Chinese herb, Huomarin. Or I guess if it was a extract of Huomarin.
If it's an extract, then I would say yes, but I think it's, I'm just saying I guess, the statute was written specifically for hemp extracts that are intended for internal use, or pardon me, for ingestion. So I want to say that if it's in a form that needs to be refined or processed in some way before it's ingested, like decocted or brewed as tea or something like this, then I would say no. But we can get clarification on that. My instincts, my first instinct is to say that it applies to hemp extract food products. And so I don't know that it was contemplated in Florida law to answer that question, but we can get clarification on it.
Yeah, and I would think the Huomarin would be a totally different animal anyway if you extracted it than hemp extract is particular part of the hemp plant rather than the seed and the whole thing.
I would agree, and actually, I think the other part of the conversation, and I don't want to get too far away from what I know to be factual, but if there's a cannabinoid or cannabidiol content in the seed and it is under 0.3%, then then it's probably not a matter of concern here. And what they're looking at is aspects of the hemp plant or cannabis species that produces or contains cannabinoids. So maybe I can't answer the question. I don't know if cannabinoids are found in the seeds or not, but we can ask for clarity on that. But my instincts say no, but I wouldn't go on my instincts. So if we have the contact information for that person, I'll make an effort to be more clear on that next week.
Thank you, David. So I just want to make sure to emphasize this. CBD and THC selling of products is a very new industry that is impacting all of not only the medical professions, but the retail professions, the laws and the rules and all that stuff. So there's going to be a lot of particular questions like the ones that you all have asked tonight in regards to, for example, Huomarin, that we're just going to have to keep on doing our research and make sure that we're giving you the most accurate information. But because this is a new industry that is going to and is currently impacting us, there's still a lot of gray area. There's still a lot of information and questions and things that these state departments haven't even considered. I wonder if the Department of Agriculture in Florida even has thought of that we sell hua ma ren, for example, as an herb. So please, give us some time and please be patient with us and keep on communicating with us. But for FSOMA, it is important for us to be able to give you the most accurate information. And this is why David is a little bit hesitant to say anything in regards to, for example, hua ma ren as a certainty, because this is such a new topic and we want to make sure that all the information that we share with you is 100% accurate.
Right. Natalia, I'll just add actually two things. The importance and the significance of the questions that we get can't be overstated, because a lot of what is going to be something that, is very specific to you and your practice is likely not been contemplated, by the law. I read probably as much of that material as was available to me. And it's there's a lot of generality in it. And even when I had a chance to talk to the cannabis czar herself, there were a couple of instances where she said, I have to ask Dr. So-and-so, I have to ask the department. And strangely enough, she was very clear on certain things. It was very easy to get what I felt, highly confident, in what the responses were. But these questions that haven't been contemplated yet, they're going to require like definitive either decision-making or legal analysis by both, whether it's from the Department of Agriculture or it's, from another constitutional legal perspective, and determining what is legal and what is not, because the law doesn't always have a specific answer for every question. It's like I say, it just wasn't contemplated in the way that they wrote the law. But the importance of the questions and the feedback that we get from the profession and everybody that was thoughtful enough to join us tonight is that that's how we shape policy going forward, by making sure that we can sort of build in those types of considerations, so that people that are in a position to decisions take into account what our specific needs are in terms of needing clarity in the law. So it's very, very helpful. And I'm sorry, what I didn't include in my earlier comments was that all of what's being discussed relates specifically to hemp extract and CBD products that are ingestible. So if you have lotions, gels, other products that are not intended for internal use, none of this discussion applies to that. It doesn't subtract from your 12 linear feet. In other words, if you had half of it was lotions and half of it was an ingestible form, that whatever space is allotted in your common area for the products intended for topical use are not going to subtract from the 12 feet allotted for your exemption. Okay, I hope that's helpful.
Do you mean, David, you mean that the lotion feet doesn't count towards the 12 feet?
Correct. So if you had, 8 feet of lotion and topicals and whatnot, it has no negative impact on the total amount of those 12 feet allowed to you.
You could have 12 feet of something else that's
correct.
ingestible. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So someone did have a question. And I know that you probably did address it, but I want to make sure that we all understand. Is it only display, or does an herb room count as a display area?
Right. And my understanding is that this was common areas in the office, but this is a question that needs more clarity, and I won't have an answer on it until next week. I have to get Commissioner Bell back on the phone or on an email. Because when you read the statute, you read the language, it's pretty plain. It's talking, it refers to a requirement of 12 feet or less to basically house these products. But contextually, it's usually applied to stores, retail settings, and things like this. So where we have dual uses in our office for what would be common area versus a dispensary or storage or preparation areas. I'll get clarity on her from that. But again, my first impulse in terms of that discussion with her was that it applied to common areas. We were talking about front areas around the desk, areas that are in the front of your office. Again, everybody's configuration of their office may be a little bit different. You might have, a 40 linear feet of display and dispensary at your front door. But I'll seek some clarity on that, and we'll have an answer hopefully next week.
Thank you, David. So for those of you that have recently commented on, for example, Kim, to explain, and Yvonne, your comment on the herb room being kept for acupuncturists mostly and not a common area, like David said, he will make sure, hopefully by next week, if not the week after, we'll definitely have more clarity on that. And we will send out an email blast and make sure to post the most current information on social media so you all have that information accurate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So any more questions on the CBD issue? Thank you, David. That was very clear.
Okay. Actually, I can add one more thing if I might. Commissioner Bell was really clear that the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services is the sole regulator and enforcer of these new statutes. So, and I say that because, so that if somebody was to visit your office, for example, and they were from your local health department or whatever, and they were examining your hemp products for sale, I would suggest being respectful and being, answering their questions and whatnot and taking their business card. But they have no regulatory or enforcement authority in the state of Florida. So in that, it's all of that, she was very clear, is that it's going to be marshaled through the Department of Agriculture. So that's where compliance lies. So if you were to have an inspector from the Department of Agriculture stop by your office, these are the regulatory and enforcement officials in the state on this question. So you want to be especially nice and pay close attention to what they say. And what I guess the reason why I bring that up is they're going to be out, visiting all different types of business settings to check for compliance, especially more with labeling, but as it applies to food permitting as well. But in the event that you're not compliant, for some reason, say you have a product that doesn't meet the 6 criteria we discussed, there's going to be a period of time for you to make adjustments to those things. There's a little a little bit of an opportunity for everybody to get familiar with how these rules work. And I'm only saying that I want you to be aware and I want you to be compliant, but we don't have to panic. If somebody was to visit you, there's going to be time for everybody to make right whatever might be cited in their office, or to seek clarification if you need answers to a question, stuff like that. Okay, thanks. If there's any other questions, I'll take them, or we'll do it by email later. Otherwise, I yield the remainder of time to Ellen. She has some important things for us tonight too.
Thank you, David.
Well, the Board of Acupuncture had 3 or 4, and I'm sorry I don't have them in front of me to say exactly what they were, but they were discipline cases where the acupuncturists ended up with maybe not a huge fine, but having to pay legal fees. And in all of the cases, probably over $1,000 up to $3,000 in legal fees for trouble they got into regarding medical record keeping. One was an acupuncturist that had been treating a couple for a number of years, and one of them had a problem. They got burned by a heat lamp, and no, I'm sorry. In this case, the insurance company came in and wanted to get medical necessity and wanted to see all the notes. And she did not have notes. She had some notes. She didn't have every day that she treated them. She didn't have every treatment she did on them. She had billed for massage. It wasn't reflected in the notes. There were things in the billing that yeah, it wasn't reflected in the notes. So, so she was, the case was taken to the Board of Acupuncture because of the lack of proper record keeping. In the second case, it was a woman who, or a man who had left a heat lamp too close to a patient, and the wife came out several times asking him to move it because her husband was complaining, and he ended up burning him. And again, this was a malpractice case, but it came out that he did not have adequate medical records. So again, a fine, probably had to pay the malpractice as well. I'm not giving you all the details or telling you who they were. And the third case was another where insurance records were requested and there weren't adequate records. So this is something that whether you bill insurance or not, if your records are requested for a heat lamp case, or maybe you blistered somebody by leaving the cups on too long, you can get before the Board of Acupuncture for not having adequate records. So we're going to start, we're going to have a 1 hour kind of introductory, 6 basic things you need to think about when you're keeping your medical records. Only one of them has to do with insurance. The others are, you know, what needs to be in those records. We'll do a quick webinar on that soon, and are collecting some other classes, because I've also had people calling the office saying, the insurance company's telling me I have to take a class on medical record keeping, and there's nowhere, you can't Google medical record keeping class. There's nothing really online or anything out there on how to do that. So we feel like that's a need that we need to put out there. But are there any questions about, it is a requirement of our license that we keep medical records for every treatment, and it's not adequate to say, see previous treatment. If you're putting your, you know, even if you're doing the same treatment every time, that's not considered good medical record keeping. That's something I just found out and need to change. But, you know, there's a lot to learn there and a lot we need to do with that. So,
thank you for sharing that, because I also thought, and I was taught that I could say, see previous notes or see initial recommendations notes or things like that. So that's something that we cannot shorthand. We have to always write out everything in detail, correct?
Pretty much. You know, we need to get more into this well, we need to keep better records, is basically, as a profession, because to have 3 and 4 instances and then these people being asked for insurance records and told they're not keeping good notes, you know, it's a problem we need to address. So
we have a question. Yvonne says soap notes. So I'm assuming that, yes, this is for both insurance note taking and for your cash paying patients as well. It's important to be able to keep very detailed information, not to reference your current notes from today on previous notes, but to write out everything in detail, because you never know, like these cases that Ellen mentioned. Oh, and we have Galina on. Awesome.
Oh, hey.
Galina Rufner is going to be presenting with us soon on proper also medical record keeping as well, right? And Amy Sears is going to be doing another one. So we have a lot of really good webinars lined up for you guys to make sure that you are safe, that you're practicing safe clinically, and your practice management. So that's awesome. So hopefully you find that
a lot of programs out there automatically copy notes over that you can carry over, and you can update. Yeah, the purpose right now is not to really talk about what's needed, just that we see this as a need that we're going to address with some workshops. We can't really cover, you know, in 5-10 minutes, you know, everything that's needed. It's just an issue you need to be aware of and We are going to be putting some classes out. Amy Sear, Galena are both going to be working to help share their knowledge base on this. So.
Yes, and John asked, when taking notes electronically, we can copy full notes or sections to the current date treatments. Very good. So yes, there's some online programs that allow you to do that.
Or in a Word document, you can just copy and paste and then update the sections that need updating. But there's more to it than that in terms of assessment, in terms of language that is better utilized. David, you had a comment on this the other day when we were talking.
Yeah, I think, there's probably elements of, our encounter with patients from visit to visit that that may carry over, but you really want to be able to document each treatment encounter as a unique treatment encounter. And as an aside, no matter what style of billing, of note-taking you use, one of the more interesting things I read recently regarding medical malpractice is the emergence of medical malpractice lawsuits being raised based on the software kind of copy and pasting, if you would, the regurgitation of the same material that was entered into somebody's notes over and over and over again, where it's carried forward by the software, and that it's become an emerging malpractice problem where it's obvious that physicians and different types of practitioners aren't really asking the questions and going through like, did you really do that neurological test, or did you really do a particular assessment? And because the software is doing the populating that data into the forms automatically, that it's become a vulnerability in terms of malpractice, and that people are being found liable for not providing adequate care or giving proper attention to a patient. Mm-hmm. So there's got to be a balance where each encounter is unique. And so the variation in your documentation is going to reflect that unique encounter, and it helps support the idea that you're actually practicing your medicine. You're not just auto-populating all of those fields. So, there is a balance to it. And I think Galena is probably in the best position to speak to what the best standard of care or the best practices on that really are. So I'll look forward to her class.
Yeah.
Yes, and Galena did write in the comments section that you cannot just copy. So for those of you that are not aware who Galena Rufner is, she is an acupuncture physician at the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. And she has helped organize and set up their acupuncture guidelines within the hospital setting. So we'll definitely learn more from her, and we're all really excited and looking forward to that. And Donna mentioned that in her doctoral program at PCOM, they did a medical record keeping that provided evidence-based guidelines, and she has found that very useful, and she currently still uses that. So Donna, if it's something that you would like to share with our community, please reach out to us, send us an email, and we can see how we can share also that information as well. Does anyone else watching us and joining us tonight have any comments or questions? I think that, Ellen, you wanted to talk about biohazard guidelines?
Just briefly, it's a reminder that
Biomedical.
we are biohazard waste generators.
Biomedical waste.
Oh, thank you. Biomedical waste. Sorry. Each county has slightly different rules. So it's something where you go to your county health department and register with them, and they come and inspect the office and set you up. And the first year you need to pay to be a biomedical waste generator. But after that, if you're under 25 pounds a month, which most of us are, you can get an exemption. But it is a legal requirement of the county, just so you know. And because I've had a number of people lately that have not known that, and we just want to reiterate that. We will be putting up on the FSOMA website a example of a bio-waste manual. It needs to have things like data sheets about your materials in the office, like the alcohol, and you can get that from your manufacturer of the alcohol. It needs to have, David can talk a little more. He's got a really good one in his office, but we're going to do some classes on that as well, or at least one webinar on that. Again, this is not the format to train people on it, but just to remind you that it's needed. And I do have a link on the announcement section of the FSOMA website where you can go to look at who in your county to contact about it.
John, so I think Ellen just answered your question. On the FSOMA website, there are links to see who in your county you would contact in regards to the permit. And Yvonne, keep records. Yes, you have to keep records of your biomedical waste container each month to prove needles are not in excess of 25 pounds.
Yeah, they do have a tracking form, which I put on the website too, that you can use to track your waste every month. And so you have a record to show when you go to apply for the permit for exemption.
Yeah. And for example, I do mail out, so I don't have a company to come and pick up the biomedical waste. I mail it out, and that also has a way for you to keep accurate records of how often you send out your biomedical waste and whatnot. So there are ways to keep track of that.
Okay.
All right, so David, Ellen, is there anything else that you want to make sure that we talk about in our first FSOMA news update? No? Okay.
I think we have a minute. Marion just asked a question about, was it material data safety sheets for CBD products?
Yes.
But was I clear on the question?
Yes, do you have any data sheets for CBD record keeping?
Yeah. Well, if it's material safety data for CBD, you get that from the manufacturer. Your supplier should be able to get those for you, but do you mean something else by CBD record keeping? Maida?
Yeah, I would say it's not a requirement.
No.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not a requirement that comes under like the labeling or the January 1st law, but it's in terms of best practices. If you have anything that's in your office that can be ingested, that, whether, it's cleaning solutions, aerosols, anything at all. If you look at it and somebody could fit it down their throat, it's worth calling the manufacturer and saying, do you have a data safety sheet on this? And then you just stick it in your red book. So you have it in the event that there is some sort of an event in the office and that involves that product. You can produce the material data safety sheet that goes along with it if you're on the phone trying to, deal with a health consequence that came of somebody ingesting it. So, and I say, as it applies to CBD, it applies to anything and everything in the office. If the manufacturer has a data safety sheet on it, it's in your interest to keep it on hand. Exactly, Febreze, for sure.
Great questions, everyone. Thank you so much. Any final words before we wrap up for tonight?
Just, it takes us all. The board is a volunteer board. They're in practice just like you. It's not like FSOMA has this huge monolithic office. Natalia and I are the office, and it takes all of us. So we appreciate, of course, your membership. If you can be a member, that supports us tremendously. If as many acupuncturists were members as the chiropractors have members, we'd have a lot more clout.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can disagree respectfully. We can hear your voice and hear all sides of an issue. And, you know, it only helps us grow to have everybody's input. You know, Mackenzie helped by giving her comments and sending that contact. You know, we want to hear from you. We want to work together to make this profession the best we can be and the, you know, the greatest.
Yeah, I'll reiterate that, you know, Mackenzie's input was really critical. You know, I'm always, you know, trying to, you know, trust and verify, but, you know, I thought I was doing the right thing, like a lot of us, getting on the phone, calling the Department of Agriculture, and I called twice, and I could have very easily been here, you know, with a bullhorn sharing the you know, upside down, inside out news with everybody, and that'd have been, you know, a terrible misstep and a big waste of time for everybody. So it's input like hers that keeps us all moving in the right direction, and I'm really grateful to have had it. So, you know, anytime anybody sees anything that they think, you know, needs, you know, more input and our attention, it's always welcome.
Yeah, we care about this profession, and we care about the future of this profession.
Yeah,
and
we care about our colleagues. You know,
yeah.
I wouldn't want to, you know, be responsible for somebody's misstep.
Yeah, and like Ellen said, the office of FSOMA is really just me and Ellen. And everyone on the board, we have, I think, 12 board of directors. They're all volunteers, and they have their own private practices. They work, they have their families. So they are literally donating their time and energy and sweat and tears to our community to make sure that we all in Florida have the best practice, to be able to practice health in a healthy way, in a good way, and keep on doing what we love doing. So like David said, you know, Mackenzie, you're amazing. Thank you so much for reaching out to us, for communicating with us. We encourage all of you to do so. Sometimes Ellen and I may take a day or two to respond to your emails. You can also reach us on our social media sites, where I'm more active in them than Ellen, but Ellen is active in them also, and so is David. So there's definitely ways for you to reach out and make your voice heard. We would love for you to volunteer and be involved as well. So thank you, all of you, for being here with us tonight, for allowing us to share these news and updates with you, for trusting us to be able to share the most up-to-date information that impacts all of us in our profession. So thank you so much from FSOMA. We wish you all a wonderful evening and a successful practice. Oh, and Ellen is actually on the comment section writing more information about the Department of Health for those of you that are interested. So definitely go and check the messages before I turn us off. This is
sure the links came through, so we might have to, if you go to the announcements section, I did have the information behind the member page, but I'll open it up right now for all of us. Okay, so
I'll be on the homepage.
You'll be in the announcements section. You scroll down and you'll find it shortly. Give me a couple of minutes to open it up.
Okay, perfect. So go ahead, David.
I was going to say, there's also part of the conversation I had with Commissioner Bell was when we were talking about Section 500.12 that has these exemptions for minor food outlets. I asked her, I said, how might we, you know, educate regulators and inspectors if they were to come by and they were unfamiliar with the law? She said it's probably in your interest to print a copy of the actual statutory language and keep it in a reference area, in a reference book in the office that you would be able to get to. So I would suggest you take and put it in your red book And then if somebody was to come in your office and ask about permitting or things that are related to CBD, you could just pull that out and show it to them. And that was her best advice because, part of our conversation was about, how people share information and not everybody's always on the same page. And she thought that might be a good idea. So it's just a one-pager, and I think I'll forward that to Ellen. We can have you guys put it on a link for people to download. Just print it and put it in their procedures book for the office.
I'll put it in the announcement section.
Okay.
Yeah. So everyone that's interested, if you go to FSOMA.org, not right now, give Ellen about 30 minutes to an hour to update this, but FSOMA.org, in the announcement section on the homepage, you just scroll through the homepage and you'll have all that information in regards to the biomedical waste and the rule.
Yeah, Section 500.
Section 500 that David mentioned.
You got it.
All right, guys, thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, for supporting us, for listening to us, for your feedback. It means the world to us. And we were going to try to do these on a semi-regular basis. If there's anything that you want to make sure that we are on top of, like anything else that comes up with the CBD license or any other topic, please reach out to us. Let us know. We will investigate. If you have information that you feel that is going to help us, share that with us like Mackenzie did. You're an awesome girl. Thank you so much. And with that, I think we're going to call it a night. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, Nat. Thanks, Ellen. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.